After Morgoth's defeat, the one you call Sauron.
The Rings of Power put out an incredible first season, but one of the things that it really missed out on talking about was why exactly the elves are dying. Well, I've gathered a bunch of theories explaining just that, with the first being the stranger's powers. The show shows off this unnamed wizard's powers like never before, almost as if he takes some from the earth itself to create a destructive force, making a truly balanced exchange of energy in the process. The theory keeps that factor in mind and points out that while the character is able to produce super powerful spells that can destroy his enemies in the blink of an eye out of thin air, it still has a cost. You could even see this in the episode where he fights off enemies with his powers, which results in firstly him getting completely blighted by his own magic.
Shadow, you came. To Shadow I bid you return.
On the other hand, fireflies started dying around him, making it clear that he used their energy. Could the same thing be happening with the elves? Without something like the rings or the Silmarils, are the characters like him using up the energy stored in Middle-earth, ultimately leading to the death of the elves, beings that depend on that for survival? Or is just one person to be blamed for stealing their magic? Of course, I'm talking about Sauron himself. I mean, keeping the same basis in mind, it really isn't the most impossible thing, especially since the character was able to infiltrate into the elven ranks to manipulate them into making the Rings of Power.
Have you tried combining it with other ores to better stretch it out?
That wouldn't be suitable.
Could that have been his plan all along? Does he just want the power that the elves have? Or does he want both the Rings' powers and the elves' powers? Sauron is known to be super manipulative and incredible at making strategic plans, so it wouldn't be out of the question if he had a bunch of backup plans to make his life easier and trap his enemies. If he couldn't get them to make his rings, he'd just take the powers of the most powerful beings on Middle-earth. But for that to make any sense at all, Sauron's powers would have to work in the same way as the strangers. What makes all this super confusing is that the original author of the source material, Tolkien, has yet to really talk about how the whole magic thing works in his universe. You'd think a universe based on magical beings and powers would at least mention that, but the biggest hint for this theory is earlier in the season, when Galadriel is going through an old fortress that's supposedly Sauron's. Well, used to be. She feels a burning cold effect, saying that's because he stole the heat from the flame.
Past feeling.
No. This place is so evil, our torches give off no warmth.
I don't know about you, but that's a big sign of how magic works in that universe, and it might be the same as Gandalf's. While I'm talking about Sauron, here's a look at all the lies Halbrand told in Rings of Power Season 1. The biggest lie he told was his real name. While Sauron claims that he never lied to Galadriel and always speaks the truth,
I'm Halbrand. What's her heading?
you can't forget that he's a master manipulator. He lied straight to her face when they met with his name. Of course, you later find out that he's actually Sauron, but are his other names really just fake names? It makes you wonder if his other names, such as Anatar or even Halbrand, are just different personas of the same character. That would only mean that he isn't lying and is Halbrand, but only a certain part of him, the one with the human face, is actually him. During the same scene, he even lies to her about his homeland. After he lies to her about his name, like any other person, Galadriel asks him where he's from. The master manipulator made sure not to be too specific with his answer.
Your home. Where was it?
But also that his answer would ultimately lead him to the place he wanted to conquer all along, the Southlands. But one thing that gives his game away, at least if you watch the first season again, is that he mentions that it's a land that's just ash.
What's it matter? It's ashes now.
I mean, could there have been a bigger hint that he's just straight up Sauron? That might be what most of you may be thinking, but before the LOTR trilogy, it was quite the opposite. His original home is nowhere near just ashes, and even his old base is frozen. So one more lie for Sauron that no one noticed until the very end of the season. While I'm on the topic of the Southlands, he lies about his people having no king. One more lie in the bag from the show's second episode. He clearly lied about this entire thing just to fit in better as someone from the Southlands. But you but can't forget that he has a king, and all the dark forces of Middle-earth are bound to follow Morgoth. Technically, that can also be true if you consider that Morgoth wasn't ever really a king, and more of a god to the people who followed him. Or could it mean that his people are waiting for him to return, so they have a king to follow? But he was sometimes honest too, especially when he hinted at his secret mission. This takes place in the show's 3rd episode, where he says that his search for peace has been going on longer than any of them could imagine.
Been searching for my peace for longer than you know. Please, for both our sakes, let me keep it.
Does this mean that he thinks he'll get peace by killing off everyone and enslaving them? Especially considering he's been alive longer than anyone else, thousands of years. He told Galadriel that according to him, the only way there will ever be peace in Middle-earth is by everyone being ruled by one banner.
A man bearing that mark united the scattered tribes of the Southlands under one banner.
So he wasn't lying over here about his plan, but it was still hidden in plain sight. You know he was trying to manipulate Galadriel, but how far back did he start planning for such a situation? Did he lie about finding the Southland crest on a dead man?
That's funny. I found it on a dead man.
He obviously lied about him being the king of the Southlands, but did he really lie about getting that crest off of a dead man? For all you and I know, he might have just been there when the actual king of the Southlands was killed, and then just nabbed it off him in case he might need it later. Galadriel thought he was deflecting the question she asked him, but it turns out that everything ended up playing according to his plan. But it doesn't just end there, and he leans further into it by lying about losing the war. While they're all in Numenor, Halbrand gets arrested for fighting in the streets in the show's 3rd episode.
Please. Don't do this.
Later, he tells Galadriel that his family lost the war in the Southlands.
It was my family that lost the war.
He's playing into something that worked for him before, showing just how cunning he can be. Though all of his lies hinted the truth, just from the opposite side because it's still true, he did lose the war along with all the other followers of Morgoth. He might mean that by that sentence he accepts they were defeated once. But this time, he doesn't intend for more of the same. This guy can take an ounce of truth from his own life and fill it up with 100 lies and still come off as the most honest person alive. Those are some of the biggest lies from Sauron and a look into why the elves are dying. See you in the next video.
Me to this island for a reason, and it will not be quelled by you.
What do you call this miracle orb?
In our tongue, Greek.
Please forgive our sacrilege, Lord Durin. We shall
I pledge my loyalty to Sauron.
Do you know what it is? There's no soul.
Queen has laid bare her intent. Our ships will depart in 10 days.